Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jonathan Hollander, and I'm the artistic director and founder of Battery Dance, which on July 1st, 2021, in the pandemic, goes into its 46th year, getting ready for what will be the 40th anniversary of our festival in August, the Battery Dance Festival. And this afternoon, I had the opportunity to come back into contact with Rulan, who is the artistic director and choreographer of Dancing Earth, a company that electrified audiences at Battery Park in our festival 13 years ago. Thank goodness that the Smithsonian brought your team to us, and fabulous reviews and wonderful audience response. And for me, truly enlightening performance. And then last year, when our festival had to go digital because of the pandemic, we had a kaleidoscopic image of the earth and nature and dancers that came also from Dancing Earth. So you have really enriched the Battery Dance Festival, Rulan, and now you're enriching my dance diplomacy interview and bringing me in contact with a great dancer, choreographer, visionary. So I'm going to leave it to you to introduce yourself and then introduce us to Raoul.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. What an honor. I'm the artistic director of Dancing Earth, but that came after a whole decade or more career in the mainstream dance world, including in New York City. So it was such a moment to come back to New York City and have our company on stage and uplifted, and with all the incredible Indigenous and global Indigenous artists that represent Dancing Earth. When we think about our influences, besides our ancestral influences, what has really been impactful in my life are the dance influences, the artistic influences. So I'm really excited because Raoul Trujillo, he's a real groundbreaker. He pushes boundaries. He's innovative. And I mean, I think I came across his work back in the olden days before there was even a computer. I mean, this is like you see an article 4 years later about someone doing this work, like, where are they? Everything took more time. But at one point in my life, I was able to work with Raoul, and I've been trying to loop him in as a collaborator or consult ever since. He's known to the world as a, quite accomplished actor, but he has a whole life before that as a director and a choreographer and dancer and visionary. So so glad to see you here today, Raoul. I'm so glad you had time for us.
Well, thank you both for asking me to do this. I literally, an hour ago, I was setting up a round pen for my horses, just to keep working with them, cleaned off the dust, wet the hair bag a little bit.
Well, my horse is parked right outside on Broadway.
Yeah, you mentioned horses, but I know you had your career in New York, but I remember you had very little studio training, but you mentioned that you had been in the lead in Equus on stage as a young man, and that was one of the things that catapulted you into dance. Is that my memory right?
Yeah, your memory serves you right. But it came about because I mean, I knew I wanted to be a dancer. I knew I wanted to be a performer my whole life, but it just didn't really present itself to me, growing up in northern New Mexico in the 70s. So it was really, I was a skier though. I was a mountains, a snow skier, which I think really propelled me into the world of movement. And, coming down with that kind of speed and force and power down a mountain, that's really what gave me the impetus to move. But it was leaving that world behind that took me on a trip down through Mexico, Central America, and South America in 1977, I want to say. And that's what changed my life and made me realize, okay, the skiing days are over and it's time to go to the theater, to the stage, which is where it's going to happen for me. But I went back as a scenic painter and light builder and pure technical stuff, because you show up at a local theater that's like, no one's gonna say, hey, who are you? You're like, oh, I'm just willing to help. And you get hired to do that. But luckily it was a drama teacher from my high school who moved to Santa Fe, a wealthy woman who was going to produce her first production of a major theatrical production, Equus. Everybody knows that, Peter Shaffer play. And it was that play that was my theatrical debut in 1977. And I remember afterwards, people were like, "Oh, you're a dancer," and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, "Yeah, I guess I am." And that's what kind of did really sort of trigger off, okay, I think I've got something going on here with movement. And so it forced me to really look into that. So yeah, I moved to LA and went to USC, University of Southern California, where I started studying some dance. But, USC was not known as a dance school at all. It was tied in with physical education. But more importantly, it just allowed me to get my feet wet. And I just remember the teachers laughing hysterically when I was doing my audition at the ballet bar. I mean, I could twist and turn in every direction, and they're just like, "Oh my God, this guy's like a pretzel, but he's going to break something or hurt something." But I was smitten. I was determined that this was what I was going to do. So just
how long did you stay at USC?
Literally for only the one semester from January to May. And because I was 24 already, because I was late getting into it, but it was just to stay physical, to move. But it was my teachers who put me in a production and had me in every single dance. And I was like, lifting girls, throwing them all over the place. I could do whatever. I could run across rooms.
And I think you're 6 feet tall. So I think that your height and your good looks, they were not going to let you get by with backstage work. No way.
And they really were instrumental in saying, you need to go somewhere. You need to go to Toronto. You need to go to New York. You need to go to an intensive summer dance thing and go for it. And I was like, okay. So I moved with $500 in my pocket to Toronto and ended up for the summer. And that was my first sort of Graham introduction. And Kazuko Hirabayashi, Bertram Ross, all the old guard of Martha Graham, those were my teachers, as well as Toronto Dance Theatre. They were all Graham based. And that lasted a summer. And then I got a year scholarship. So I stayed a year. And then after that, I think I did my first full evening work. I mean, that's how ambitious I was. Like, I can do this. So I just created work using strippers and martial artists and actors, anybody that wanted to just be in a production in Santa Fe. That theater has since burnt down. And then that led me to another $500 moving to New York City. And again, another scholarship with Nikolai Dance Theater. And that's really how it all kind of happened I was going to say with Nick now, I stayed dancing with him for 8 years. So it was a good 10 years of solid dancing and touring all over the world.
And he was known as a great teacher as well as a phenomenal creator. So I think that you ended in a very good place in terms of just filling in the blanks in terms of your technique and everything else.
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, I was entertaining, everybody in, Paul Taylor, just everybody who had a company. Eric Hawkins, of course, was the first one. And he was like, "I would love to have you." And I settled on Nick because there was something about Nick and Murray that spoke to me, and because they didn't come from a place of just dance and intellectualizing about dance, and they always compared dance to art, to paintings, to music. And so I knew that they were the right fit. And I think Nikolai was to dance what Meisner was to acting. It was about being in the moment. It was about using the average breath and awareness of space to inform you before you even created a step or made a step. So I think they spoke to me with the way that they saw dance happening organically from the body. And they were so anti-classical training, not so much training, but the anti-classical result of performance. It's like, no, we don't need to do this anymore. And we can abandon all that. And let's see the beauty and the ugliness of just the human condition. And I think that's what spoke to me for all those years. And I think because also the immersion into costume making and lighting and music, that's what gave me the full understanding and the preparation then So when I was really ready to embark on my solo work, which the shaman journey is probably my biggest piece to date. It has been performed numerous times with many dancers, not just a soloist. But also, it also prepared me for my work with American Indian Dance Theater, because I could go in there.
Pause here, because there's some big things you're bringing in.
Well, I'll bring it
Yes.
in, and you can break it down, and I'll end right there. But that was the end of sort of what I want to call the modern classical phase of my work. And then now I was embarking onto what I would say was truly bringing indigenous myth and realities into the dance and onto the stage.
Well, I love, talking about a late start, because that can be so inspiring for people who, they're living in a rural place and they don't have access. But I remember distinctly you saying to me, like, oh yeah, you want to know where my training was? It was on the river rocks, learning how to balance my feet on the river rocks. So, having what you have around you, you can be an artist. And for that to take you then, then you were working in New York, and some of the names you've mentioned, Martha Graham, Eric Hawkins, are some of the, they're credited as the founders of American modern dance. And there's an interesting theme there for you coming in as a Native man and, coming across these styles of dance, when I think those styles of dance owe a lot to Native American culture. Maybe you could tell me your perspective on that.
Once I started, exploring, especially Eric, because Martha had choreographed a piece for him called Les Flagellants, which was not only, it was based on New Mexico culture of penitentes and all that, but she was also inspired by just the dance that was happening within the communities here, in ceremonials. And so exploring them, but from a different lens, if you will, because, my whole experience as a dancer, before I became a dancer, really, in that way, and I use the quotation marks, but, when you grow up in amongst the pueblos and seeing, the deer dances and the Marachena dances and the dances that have been performed, for thousands of years, except for maybe the Marachena, which is more colonial, came with the Moors, 500 years. But when you come from that place of seeing the dance happens through ceremony and through ritual, and it's part of a living culture, then when you go out into that world, you kind of go, okay, well, that's very different. I mean, it was like really, I could recognize that ballet was rooted not only in early folk European dances, but it was also rooted in performances for the royal classes. So hence these upright, very rigid bodies, speaking of, and it had nothing to do, I couldn't even relate to it, really. And that's why I say that it was Nick and those others that spoke to me, because they broke down that stoicism and rigid architecture of the body and broke it into components that I could understand,
Wow.
Space, time, shape,
That's
motion.
phenomenal. That is really, really phenomenal. I know that the people who studied with Nikolai and Lewis became so advocating of their methodology, and that it was a unique way and unique pathway in dance training, not just the work itself, which was magnificent and unique, but also the training. And so, many outgrowths, many dance companies and choreographers that came out of that training did their own work. And I have to guess that Nikolai and Lewis were very supportive when people would leave and create something of their own.
Oh, I still remember when I was rehearsing and creating the Shaman's Journey, I was ready to show somebody and get some feedback. The whole way of teaching and creating choreography with Nick was without any extras. It was just bare bones. If the choreography could stand on its own without costumes, without anything else, and just bare bones, that's when he would go, "You're onto something." And if you didn't recognize it, he would call you on it right away and just say, look, no. There's no foundation here. There's no architecture here.
Mhm.
So I remember when I called him in for that very first viewing of the Shaman's Journey. And again, this was a stage piece. This is a, 20-minute piece. And he was blown away. He was blown away by the purity of the execution of all the movements, of all the spirit components and animal components. He was just like, wow. I mean, I just remember like, really? So you're not going to tear me apart? Because he used to tear me apart all the time in composition classes and improv.
But what could be more exciting for him than to see one of his dancers, a dancer he had nurtured and supported, come into his own, which you obviously did, and which our audience will be seeing in a few minutes, this beautiful 9-minute extract that was created for public broadcasting back in 1989. So I can put myself in that chair with Nick, watching you and just being blown away and saying, wow, this is who this guy really is. I saw it. I thought the potential was there, but look at what's happened here.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt, because I was torn to shreds, especially by Murray, throughout all of the training for a year. And I remember, because Nick had a way of going around, and ever since I've implemented the very same thing with any company that I work with, and I break it down. He had a way of telling you what was wrong with what you were doing, but immediately followed by what you're doing that was right.
Mm-hmm.
So he never left you just going, oh, I'm a loser. I'm missing it. He always left it with, and I remember clearly, it was like, Raoul, you have technique for shit, but I know that I can put you on a stage by yourself and you will command that space in your solitude. And I'd be like, wow, that's pretty amazing, man. And it's like, okay, so I don't really need to, do all this fancy, fast movement. I can just zero in on what it is that I do best, which was inhabiting space, inhabiting time and shape, and just allowing truth to come from that place, rather than, as choreographers, a lot of times we just feel like we always have to be flashy. We always have to do whatever we think we saw that we like from somebody else. And you're never told ever, your vision is yours. It's not trying to be somebody else. It's just, what is it you want to say? What is it you want to do? And I had always wanted, since I was young, was to bring myths and legends and the spirituality that I experienced growing up as a child, watching all these dances and watching all these ceremonies. I wanted to see that on a stage. I wanted to see that so it could touch people, heal people, and bring them to a place of being animistic again. Because I feel like in this world, we've lost all sense of animism. We've lost all sense of making space sacred and making every moment sacred. We've profaned so much in our lives and in art. You saw the art changes in the 80s in New York. Incredible artists like Basquiat went from penniless to all of a sudden dead, but boom, his work sells for millions because people found a way to still profane the creation itself, because it's always about money. So as a choreographer, you're always pushed to, I remember when Rulan, when we did the show Tribe, it was the same producer from Rent, and he wanted basically an Indian Romeo and Juliet story, to go to Broadway. And it was like, I remember saying, well, we got a lot of stories. I don't know about a Romeo and Juliet one, because you guys cornered that market. We can give you something else, maybe the dance of the moon and the sun is
so
personified.
how you took that, because I saw the audition notices and it didn't look that interesting, but I saw your name and Alejandro Rosaria's name, and I was like, oh, these are the folks again, this is like earlier than internet being really so common, but I'd seen, evidence of you taking ideas and really pushing them to an innovative edge. And I want to say, oh, what's he going to do with this? And I didn't even audition, but you're so really like opening the lens of who you were bringing into the process about how you defined Native, you were including global Indigenous, and I had never seen anything so inclusive like that. And as a result, you had an incredible talent in the room. But what was really impactful, I think, was you saying this stage, this theater space can be claimed for our ceremonies, for our rituals, not how they used to be hundreds and thousands of years ago, although some of that might still be, you know, the energy might be there, but for innovation. And it felt so like, you know, like what we all needed and wanted to hear in order to, you know, bring the respect to the theater and claim it as ours, and to, you know, bring something new that, like, you really were pushing us to find something new. So that was the beginning of me really having the impact of your influence as a director, which I now am seeing how it's all, you know, layered through these different parts of your career. Your mentorship by Nikolai, and is like Dancing with the River Rocks, and even the theater work with Equus. Like, now I'm starting to understand how those start to shape the innovations that you bring as a director.
Yeah, well, it was always nature. Nature always had a huge influence. Like, what you experience out there, you know, is just so powerful. And if you could bring that onto a stage, and I always felt that. And I always felt that about the dance, the choreography, the movement. If that could also live within that sacred realm, then why not? Why are we not pushing forward like the crazy horses who came back from a hunt and danced out that actual hunt of that particular day and that particular animal? Why aren't we doing it? So we should. We are these modern day warriors now who are retelling stories. So that's always was the journey, and it still is even now, even though I'm dancing less and choreographing less. But even as an actor, it comes into all the work I do now. I'm always informed by movement. How does this character move? And that's what shapes and creates the character for me. That has not changed at all in all these last 40 years.
I love that centering of the body as a source of knowledge and the place where your acting career comes from. And I know we're going to be having a chance to take a peek at the shaman's journey. And I wanted to, I'm reminded of a conversation we had about that piece, that when it was performed, either in the review or just in like discussion about it, that people were thinking that it might be Butoh influenced, but you said you had not seen Butoh as a form before you made that piece. But you talked about both.
Okay, let's just back a little bit. Shaman's Journey, though, was already an evolution of something. I had done a solo, which was the very last piece of the Shaman's Journey, the ancient one, the one covered in clay. And I had done that piece like so many years before that as a composition for What Are the Classes with Nick. And it was a showcase of, you know, what are the dancers doing this year? And that was a showcase for all the dancers and our choreography. But so that piece came earlier, but it was based on the mud dancers from the Pueblo culture here in New Mexico that, you know, I was witness to growing up. So that's what that was based on. And I had already experimented with, you know, again, you mentioned what are the places. It's a very, Jonathan, it's a beautiful canyon near me here. It's the Embudo Canyon. It's a river runs through it, and there's these giant precipice canyon walls that all look like elders. I mean, you see profiles, and they're the guardians of this river down there.
And in the film, there's a scene with.
That's it. So I wanted it. That has always been my source. That is where, when Rulan mentioned earlier, I taught myself very basic things, because I remember, you know, I was young. I was going there, you know, since I was a child. So, and even when I was in New York, and I was in my 20s, every trip back to New Mexico, I'd spend 4 days there just to sort of clear all the shit from New York and purify myself to come back and be around family and home again. But it was that particular place, that river, where I learned, I taught myself balancing on one leg and doing extensions and all that. And if you can do that on a rock in the middle of a rushing fast running stream on slippery moss rock. If you can do that,
No. We have to have the dance floor. It has to be perfect. It has to be sprung wood.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So if you can do all the stuff that I was doing, I used to run up and down these canyons from boulder to boulder, jumping barefoot on, and then you hit a slippery, mossy bit, but you catch yourself. But that's where I learned how to move, so that when you hit a even floor, that was like, this is not a problem at all. So I always thought about that when I would create certain movements and on dancers, I would try to put yourself in this situation. Don't put yourself on a floor trying to just balance, because that's harder than hell. Try just balancing, because you are part of a rock that is stationary in this river and water's gushing through past you. You have to feel that. And all of a sudden it just changed people's reality, because it's like, oh, okay, boom. I don't have to worry about
listening to Raoul talk this way and thinking about the piece that we saw of Dancing Earth last year, and your, Rulan, your emphasis on the interaction between the human body and the dancer and the space and the nature. This is something that, at my entire career has been here in New York. So it's not about the dance in nature, because I'm so removed from nature here. But as a viewer, as a curator, as a producer, I'm just enriched by your experience and seeing how dance can live in this earth. And I think this is a perfect segue to go to the shaman's journey and to see the way that Raoul interacts with the different surfaces that he's dancing on in this piece, the way that the sand or the dust rises up when he does his footwork in that circle. We're all going to see this. It's something just elemental, and it's something very pure, and yet it's built on all this experience that we've just been hearing about in terms of, the information, the education of a dancer.
But I remember very clearly too, all those years when I was still creating solo work, even while I was living in New York City, I was using the same energy that was in the city. Even though it was urban, it was still the same vibrant, vital energy. And it was still there. I mean, and that was Nick. Don't you remember in the 80s, they called it site specific. That's the term they gave it. Remember? It was when you took dance out of the theater, out of the dance studio, and you went to a park. You went to something, they called it site specific, because it was trying to, again, break out of that headspace that it all needs to be indoors. And Nick was great for that, because I remember we did a piece in Taormina on Sicily, and Mount Etna was erupting in the background, and we were performing in an old Roman ruin that had been turned into a dance platform area down below, where we did some of the work. But some of our other pieces, we were like up on these pillars with the volcano erupting behind us. So he immediately told us, this is how big the vision has to be for all your movement. It has to be this big to transcend and to compete with the bloody volcano or whatever, a river or something. That's how big and truthful it has to be. So
well, you actually put that into, when you were directing, you put that into he's called Concrete Warrior. I think I remember the lyrics.
Yeah.
Skyscrapers are my canyons. Another way of seeing the city is, in fact, all of those materials, they are captive materials from nature. Everything comes from nature, but I do want to get back to that Buto point, because you said, even though you had,
So when I did see Sankai Juku, I was just like, oh my God, I'm doing that, because it was basically born out of this necessity. When you have that kind of genetic memory in you anyway, through all your ancestors, and then, you've got Buto dancers who have created a whole movement of dance coming from healing their humanity, healing the toxicity and the poison of atomic, bombs going off in their lands. And that created this whole movement of dance. But yet for me, it was rooted from something more positive because it came from a genetic memory of the mud dances that I'd experienced as a kid. But either way, they both gave birth to slowing down movement, slowing down ceremony, slowing down everything to just this utter sublime timelessness that existed in the execution of movement. And you see that in the very last section of the ancient one in the shaman's journey. It was all slowed down. So you see the water literally dripping off the fingers. I mean, you know, it's again, but it's a long story. It's been a great
masterpiece.
I love it.
Masterpiece. I think we're ready. We've got the appetite. We're going to see this beautiful, beautiful film, and it's going to have a new generation of audience members. So that is wonderful. Thank you, Rulan, for introducing me to Raoul. I feel like this is the first, I hope it's like the prelude for many more conversations, Raoul, and certainly Rulan.
Absolutely, conversations, and please, I would do anything to come back to my old tromping grounds of New York, Battery Park, and
I'm hearing you.
And to help you, to help you in any way, to bring to another generation of dancers this stuff, because at this point in the world, we need healing, and the healing dance has always been a healing thing for so many, and it continues to be. And, you know, however, bring me back to New York, and I would gladly partake in anything that you have to offer.
Okay, the thought is planted.
And as we say here in Indian country, you plant the seeds, the plants will grow.
Thanks for the connections, both of you.
Yeah, thank you so much.